Hi, Gene here with today's thought, and today we're going to be talking about hypocrisy, specifically the hypocrisy of these campus protesters that we've been seeing so much of lately. And I use the scare quotes around protesters because protesting means to be against something, and these people clearly are for something. They are pro-Hamas, they are pro the destruction of Israel, they are pro frankly, the killing of every Jew between the Mediterranean and the Jordan. The important takeaway from this is that they actually care. This is why I use the scare quotes, the main reason, because supposedly they're supposed to be caring about the Gazans, the civilians in Gaza, 70% of whom, by the way, in polls have indicated, have stated flatly, actually, that they support what Hamas did, and they still support Hamas despite everything that's happening. So you can call them civilians. I would not call them innocent civilians, however, because especially if they are helping Hamas. And I would actually, just to be fair, give a little credit here. I read a story that some Gazans are starting to cooperate with the Israelis, especially in helping them locate hostages. And here's something I don't understand. Another aside, I don't know why the Israelis, they drop leaflets to warn civilians that they're about to attack a certain area so that they can get out. What I don't understand is why they don't drop leaflets offering substantial rewards for information leading to the rescue of hostages. That would seem to be an obvious tactic to me. So I hope someone sees this and actually does that. To me, it's such an obvious thing that they should be doing. But the hypocrisy comes in. The reason it's so clear that they care nothing about the Gazan civilians, innocent or not, is because I have to give you a figure here that I just heard, $15 million. That's the cost so far of these protests. And I don't mean cost to universities. I mean the cost to stage these protests. Now, in Colombia, that camp was cleared out. Hundreds were arrested. And it turns out, it was just reported today, New York Post, that half of those protesters are not students of Columbia. They specifically talked about the one leader of these protests is a 63-year-old professional protester, which is another point that I'm getting to, that they are being paid. A lot of these people, these protesters, are getting paid. That's number one. But you see all these identical tents. Those cost money. These Palestinian flags that they're waving, those cost money. And in UCLA, in California, the riot police finally cleared out an encampment there, and the protesters had put up plywood, 4x8 sheets of plywood, or just a line hole sheet of ring their little encampment with plywood. Well, that costs money too, and then that plywood had to be shipped to them, put on trucks, shipped to them. So you understand there's a lot of money behind it, and the hypocrisy comes in if they actually, because what they're doing is doing nothing to help the Gazans. Now, the Israelis, on the other hand, they're bringing in humanitarian aid, or they're allowing it in, and they are opening, they're doing what they can to protect the civilians. And one thing they're doing specifically is building tents. Now they have, or putting up tents. They have already ordered 40,000 tents to put up to house the population of Rafah as they are moved out of the areas where the fighting would be. So there are tents. These campus radicals are putting up tents. Now, I'm going to say radicals now because I'm tired of putting up the scare quotes every time I say protesters. But those tents would be much more useful in Gaza. Why do these radicals, instead of using these tents on college campuses, why don't they donate them to Gaza to house to shelter the Gazans, the people that these people supposedly care about, that these radicals ostensibly care about, whom they are professing to care about. And then I mentioned the figure, $15 million of what this all has cost. Well, instead of buying the tents in the first place to put on these campuses, and the plywood and the food and the salaries for for the professional agitators who are leading these protests, why don't they just donate the $15 million for foreign aid, for aid to Gaza, for humanitarian aid, food, shelter, specifically these tents. $15 million would buy a lot of tents, and it's clear they don't care about the Gazans. What they are doing is they're basically, essentially, for all practical purposes, doing exactly what Hamas is doing and using these Gazans as human shields, because what they really want, again, they are not supporting, they are not against something, they are for something. They are for a Hamas victory. They want to give them hope. They are in fact, you're already seeing Hamas. Well, Iran is praising these radicals, all these demonstrations. They're praising them because, and Hamas is praising them too, and Hezbollah is praising them, but Hamas especially. Well, I don't want to say Hezbollah. I would be surprised if they were not, but I don't remember. I think I read a specific news report about Hezbollah voicing support, but I'm not 100% sure, so don't tie me to that. I admit I could be wrong, but definitely Hamas, definitely Iran, and definitely these radicals on all these campuses. But again, they are giving them hope. That is the only way this ends, and I'm not just talking about this this current war between Israel and Hamas. In the short term, they have to be defeated. They either have to unconditionally surrender or they have to be killed, and those who surrender have to be exiled from Gaza. But the ultimate solution to solve this whole problem of the whole area is for Palestinian Authority, Hamas, Gazans, those in the Arabs living under the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. They have to lose all hope of ever defeating Israel. They have to finally come to as I said in an earlier vlog, the 5 stages of death. The first stage is denial, and then you ultimately realize that you're going to die. And they have to in the same spirit, the Arabs have to realize that Israel is there to stay because they are the indigenous population, number one. Number two, nothing is going to force the Israelis out. The whole idea of, well, to give you an idea how spectacularly the Palestinians are shooting themselves in the foot, the security wall that is up between Israel and Gaza, but especially between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And by the way, 8,000 work permits were just issued to Palestinians today, and another 8,000 are to be given. So how does that how does that comport with this idea of genocide? I mean, if the Israelis wanted to eliminate all the Arabs or all the Palestinians, well, first of all, there are Arabs in Israel, number one, so shouldn't that population be zero? But also, if Israel wants to kill every Palestinian between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, why are they issuing work permits? It seems kind of incongruous to me. But as usual, I'm straying. That's why I do these summaries at the beginning, because I do one subject leads to another, to another, to another. So I was talking about the security wall. Now, the security wall, the whole point, there was no security wall for 20 years, from the 67 war until like in 1988, 89. I don't know the exact date. I don't remember. But the reason that wall went up was because suicide bombers were coming in from the Palestinian Authority area, from Judea and Samaria, coming into Israel and blowing themselves up and taking a lot of Israelis with them. And the final straws, I believe, was a club called the Dolphinarium, and dozens of young Israelis were killed when a suicide bomber just walked in. And there was also, in a hotel, there was a bar mitzvah celebration, bar mitzvah dinner, and a suicide bomber walked in and blew, I think it was a woman, blew herself up and killed a lot of people. So the Israelis finally put up a security wall. But the logic behind the suicide bombers, it was specifically to get the Israelis to put up the wall. The Palestinians wanted that wall to go up. Now, you may ask, why would they do that? And here is why. The idea was that I just mentioned the 8,000 workers who were admitted into Israel, and before that, there were a lot of Palestinians working in Israel, which is another point, that these Palestinian state, or whatever the heck they want, any Palestinian entity, they are totally dependent on Israel, at least for foreseeable future, for jobs, for water, for electricity. So, and I would also add for security to keep Hamas from taking over at least the Palestinian Authority area. But the idea was that would stop, that the Israelis would put up this wall and stop admitting the Palestinians, and then two things. Number one, essentially use them, those Palestinians, as human shields. In other words, if they can't work in Israel, then they really can't. It would turn into, the Palestinian Authority area would turn into Bangladesh or some third world area where there's starvation and there's no economy. And that was their plan, number one. And number two, that Israel would, by not allowing these Palestinian workers into Israel, that the Israeli economy would suffer, and because with the lack of the workers, they wouldn't have enough workers because Israel is a growing economy and they need workers. But what happened, and it just happened again in Gaza when Israel went in and they were no longer admitting Gazans into work, but I think they just allowed a few in. So there again, where's the genocide? But what did the Israelis do? They hired Thais and Chinese. In other words, they hired foreign workers and Indians. They hired foreign workers for other companies to come in and replace the Palestinians who were no longer able to come in. In other words, the Palestinian Authority, their plan backfired, and they shot themselves in the foot. And this happens again and again and again, that they have this dream of destroying Israel, and they try every which way. It backfires. Israel just gets stronger. I would also mention that the Israeli birth rate has now surpassed the Arab birth rate. And one reason is because Arab women, by the way, unlike Arab women through other places in the Middle East, they get educations. They get college educations right along with Jewish students, and then they go into professions. And just as in this country, professional women have fewer children. They don't go out and have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 children usually, and there may be could be a few exceptions. Well, there probably are, but you get the point. The Israeli birth rate has passed the Palestinian birth rate. And actually, they've surpassed the Arab birth rate everywhere in the Middle East, except I believe Iraq is the only country that has a similar birth rate. So the point I was making, and I'll make it again and end on this, just to emphasize, is that only when the Palestinians understand that they are not going to destroy Israel, that Israel's not going back to the 1967 armistice lines, the millions of descendants of refugees, thus making them under international law not refugees, are not going to be having a right of return because they're not to Israel. If there ever is a Palestinian independent entity, then they can go to Palestine, which is what you should want. I mean, Israel, when Israel was reestablished, 1948, they didn't demand that Jews go to be allowed to enter Arab countries or other countries. They wanted to come to Israel to build up the country. But the Palestinians, they want them to go to Israel to outnumber the Jews and in that way destroy Israel. So that's they have to understand that's not going to happen, and they have to understand that Jerusalem will never be divided, if for no other reason that the Arabs in Jerusalem don't want Jerusalem to be divided. In fact, there's an Arab woman now running for the city council in Jerusalem, and all praise to her, because I think she's the first one, because any Palestinian who runs for the city council immediately gets death threats, because the Palestinians on the one hand say, well, we want an independent state or whatever, but they don't want any. Right now, they do everything they can to prevent any interaction between Palestinians and Israelis. So how does that promote peace? But she's running for the city council, which is a very good the problem there, if you compare the western part of Jerusalem, the Jewish part, with the Arab part, the eastern part of Jerusalem, that Jews live everywhere and Arabs live everywhere in Jerusalem, but the majority in the eastern side is Arab, and they have the infrastructure there is not as good as on the Jewish side, and it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Israelis are reticent to do anything there because they get condemned by the international community if they do anything, because the international community sees that as Israel keeping the city united. And in other words, why would Israel put millions and millions and millions into building up the infrastructure only to give it away in some kind of peace deal? So, which is obvious, and that's again because not just the Arabs, but the international community has this dream, this fantasy of Israel being divided, and that's why they won't locate their embassies. And though that's changing, Argentina is going to have an embassy, and I think one other country, I'm not sure, but definitely Argentina, and though they're technically not European, but that's one reason Israel doesn't put the money there. But another reason is that there are no East Jerusalem. There are no Jerusalem Arabs on the city council, and at least. And because they have no representation on the council, they have no. They can't advocate for their constituents. For Eastern Jerusalem, if you're on the city council, you can say, well, I need this, I need that, in our area, and they would get something. And that, because that helps it helps show the world community, the international community, that Jerusalem is united, and that the eastern part of Jerusalem is going to be just as good as the western part. And I guess I've talked enough. Just a final end on my initial point, or the reason for this whole thought for today, is that if these campus radicals really cared about the Gazans, they would donate their money to, and the tents that they are buying, to the Gazans. They would send the money to help the Gazans instead of these useless protests on college campuses, which does nothing to actually help the Gazans about whom these people profess to care. And this really is my thought for today. Thanks for stopping by. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. Share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it, but most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.